The Viridian Empire's flagship Eternal Light hung motionless against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars. Ambassador Kira Valen stood on the observation deck, her iridescent scales shifting colors with each breath as she studied the sensor readings for the 100th time. The anomaly they detected shouldn't exist, a ship that appeared and disappeared at will, leaving only quantum echoes in its wake. Ambassador, Captain Mira Thorne's voice carried a note of tension rarely heard from the veteran commander. We've got another signature. Same pattern as before, but bigger. Valen's dorsal crests rose in anticipation. For 3 cycles, they'd been playing this game of hide-and-seek with the Phantom vessel. Now, finally, something had changed. The space before them seemed to ripple, like heat waves rising from desert sands. Where there was nothing, suddenly there was everything. A ship that dwarfed the Eternal Light materialized less than a kilometer away. Its hull gleamed with a metallic sheen that seemed to drink in starlight, and there were no visible weapon ports or engine nacelles. Yet somehow, Valen knew this vessel could reduce their flagship to atoms in seconds if it wished. Imperial Vessel Eternal Light, the communication came on all frequencies simultaneously, translated perfectly into High Viridian. This is the Earth Alliance vessel Prometheus. You have been selected for First Contact Protocol Alpha 7. Valen's heart skipped a beat. Humans. The mysterious species that had appeared in the galaxy barely 50 years ago, establishing trading outposts and colonies with unprecedented speed, yet remaining largely enigmatic. Their technology was rumored to be centuries ahead of other species, but few had ever seen their true capabilities. Captain Thorne, Valen straightened her ceremonial robes. Open a channel. The human ship's holographic projection filled their command center, showing a bridge that seemed more like a meditation chamber than a military command post. At its center stood a human female with dark skin and silver-streaked hair, wearing a simple white uniform without rank or insignia. I am Commander Diana Wells of the Earth Alliance, she spoke with a calm authority that immediately commanded respect. Ambassador Valen, your reputation precedes you. Your diplomatic missions to the Centauri Concordat were impressive. Valen's scales shifted to a formal purple hue. Commander Wells, we are honored by this contact. Though I admit, your methods of arranging this meeting were unconventional. A smile touched Wells' lips. We have our reasons, Ambassador. Your ship has been chosen as one of 3 vessels that will be permitted to visit Earth itself. This is not an invitation we extend lightly. The command center fell silent. Earth, humanity's heavily guarded homeworld, protected by defense systems that had repelled even the dreaded swarm fleets. No non-human had ever been allowed within its solar system. Why us? Valen asked, her diplomatic training warring with her burning curiosity. Because, Ambassador, Wells' expression grew serious, humanity has reached a turning point. The technologies we've developed, the powers we've unlocked, they're too significant to keep to ourselves any longer. But we need partners we can trust. Your people's response to this encounter will help determine if you can be such partners. As if to emphasize her words, the Prometheus shifted slightly, and Valen's scientific officer gasped. The sensors were finally getting clear readings of the vessel, and they defied everything the Viridians thought they knew about physics. You have 14 standard days to consult with your government, Wells continued. If you accept our invitation, you will be provided coordinates and protocols for the journey to Earth. Be advised, any attempt to deviate from these protocols will be considered hostile action. Valen's scales rippled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. And if we decline? Then we part ways peacefully, and your people's development continues on its natural course. Wells paused. But Ambassador, ask yourself, can your civilization afford to refuse this opportunity? Before Valen could respond, the Prometheus began to fade from view, not like a ship engaging stealth systems, but like a dream dissolving upon waking. Within seconds, only the quantum echoes remained. Captain Thorne turned to Valen, her normally stoic expression betraying a hint of awe. Orders, Ambassador. Valen stared at the empty space where the human ship had been, her scales settling into the deep blue of determination. Prepare a priority quantum transmission to the Imperial Council. And Captain, I believe we're about to make history. The Imperial flagship Eternal Light emerged from its final quantum jump at the edge of human space, its crystalline sensors immediately overwhelmed by the density of artificial signatures surrounding them. Ambassador Valen watched as her crew struggled to process what they were seeing. Ambassador, Lieutenant Rax called from his station, his scales flickering between shades of confusion and awe. I'm detecting, well, I'm not sure what I'm detecting. The space ahead seems to be folded somehow. Before Valen could respond, 3 sleek vessels materialized around them, appearing from what seemed like tears in the fabric of space itself. Unlike the Prometheus, these ships bore visible weapons, if you could call them that. What looked like liquid metal flowed across their hulls, forming and reforming into different configurations. Viridian Vessel Eternal Light, a new voice filled their communications chamber. This is Captain Marcus Rivera of the Earth Defense Force vessel Hyperion. We'll be your escort through the Sol defense grid. Please maintain your current velocity and trajectory. Any deviation will be problematic. Valen noticed how he didn't bother to explain what problematic meant. They'd all heard the stories of ships that had attempted to probe Earth's defenses. None had returned. As they proceeded deeper into human space, the true scope of humanity's achievements began to unfold before them. Massive structures hung in the void between worlds, not space stations as Valen had initially thought, but machines of incomprehensible purpose. Some seemed to be manipulating the very structure of spacetime, creating what their science officer described as localized physics bubbles. Those are our basic research facilities, Captain Rivera explained, apparently noting their interest. Nothing classified, of course. Just standard zero-point energy extraction and quantum engineering labs. Valen's scientific advisor, Dr. Kell, nearly choked at the casual mention of technologies that their civilization had barely begun to theorize about. Standard, he managed to ask. A soft chuckle came over the comm. We found it more efficient to move certain physical constants out of the way when they interfere with our work. I'm sure you understand. They didn't, and that was precisely the point. As they approached Mars, the density of human activity increased exponentially. Massive shipyards stretched across thousands of kilometers, constructing vessels that made the Eternal Light look like a child's toy. But it wasn't just the size that was impressive, it was the casual display of technology that should have been impossible. Ambassador, Captain Thorne called softly. You need to see this. A massive structure was taking shape before them, a perfect sphere the size of a small moon, but it seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Parts of it appeared and disappeared as they watched, as if the structure was breathing. Ah, that's the new quantum computation center, Rivera said. It processes data across multiple timeline variants simultaneously. Allows for more efficient problem solving, you understand. Though I should warn you, looking at it directly for too long can cause some interesting temporal side effects. We had a visitor last month who ended up experiencing their entire trip in reverse. Valen forced herself to look away from the mesmerizing structure. Every new revelation seemed designed to demonstrate just how far beyond their understanding human technology had progressed. Yet something about Rivera's casual explanation suggested they were still only seeing the surface. As they passed Jupiter's orbit, they encountered their first genuine surprise, or rather, the humans' first display of genuine emotion. A massive vessel was approaching from the opposite direction, its design unlike anything they'd seen in human space. It moved with an organic fluidity that reminded Valen of the ancient sea creatures from Viridia's oceans. Xerillian diplomatic vessel, Rivera's voice had lost its casual tone. They received their invitation 2 days before you. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say, Ambassador? The implications weren't lost on Valen. The Xyrillians were their closest competitors in terms of technological advancement, and their relationship with the Viridian Empire had always been complicated. Captain Rivera, Valen kept her voice carefully neutral. Are you suggesting there's more to these invitations than simple diplomatic outreach? Ambassador, in my experience, humans rarely do anything for just one reason. Rivera paused. We're approaching the inner defense perimeter now. Please prepare your crew for quantum signature verification. An ambassador. Whatever you think you understand about our capabilities or intentions, I suggest you keep your mind open. Earth has a way of exceeding expectations. As if to emphasize his point, space itself seemed to part before them, revealing a tunnel of pure energy leading toward the heart of the Sol system. Valen's scales shifted to the deep green of profound realization. They weren't just being invited to witness human advancement. They were being deliberately shown a carefully curated series of demonstrations. Earth appeared before them like a jewel set against the velvet black of space, but it was almost impossible to see the planet's surface through the web of orbital infrastructure surrounding it. Massive rings circled the equator, their surfaces shimmering with energy patterns that made Valen's eyes hurt. Satellites that looked more like abstract art than functional machines moved in impossible patterns, weaving a dance that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Welcome to Earth, Captain Rivera announced, though his tone suggested something more than simple greeting. Ambassador Valen, you and your core team are cleared for transfer to Orbital Command. The rest of your crew will remain aboard the Eternal Light. Valen noticed he wasn't making it a request. As their shuttle approached one of the orbital rings, she finally understood why. The structure wasn't just a station, it was a single massive machine, extending through dimensions she could barely perceive. Their sensors couldn't even begin to analyze it. The docking procedure was unlike anything they'd experienced. Instead of mechanical clamps or tractor beams, space itself seemed to cradle their shuttle, guiding it with absolute precision into a bay that appeared to create itself as they approached. Inside Orbital Command, they found themselves in a vast chamber alongside the Xyrillian delegation. High Admiral Jackson Cole stood before them, his dark uniform devoid of any insignia or decoration. Unlike the casual confidence they'd encountered from other humans, Cole radiated an intensity that made Valen's scales ripple with unease. You're wondering why you're here, Cole began without preamble. Why, after 50 years of keeping Earth off limits to all alien species, we've suddenly invited you inside our most secure facility. He gestured, and the chamber transformed around them. They were suddenly standing in what appeared to be deep space, surrounded by stars and something else. What you're seeing is live, Cole continued. This is the edge of known space, approximately 30,000 light-years from Earth. Watch carefully. The stars began to disappear. Not dramatically, not with any obvious effect, they simply winked out, one by one, leaving behind absolute darkness. Valen heard the Xyrillian ambassador make a sound she'd never heard from their species before, fear. We detected it 3 years ago, Cole's voice was grim. An entity, or entities, moving through the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. Not just matter and energy, but spacetime itself. We call them the Void. The holographic display shifted, showing the progression of the phenomenon. At its current pace, it would reach Earth in less than 20 years. But surely, the Xyrillian ambassador spoke, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with anxiety, with your level of technology. Our technology. Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything you've seen, every demonstration of our capabilities, was developed in response to this threat. We've thrown everything we have at it. Quantum weapons, temporal disruption fields, even attempts to shift affected regions into parallel dimensions. Nothing works. Valen's analytical mind raced ahead of the conversation. The invitations, she said. You're not showing us your power, you're showing us your desperation. Cole's expression shifted to something approaching respect. Close, Ambassador, but not quite. We're showing you our preparation. Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before. We've learned that survival doesn't come from having the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology. It comes from adaptation, cooperation, and most importantly, understanding what each species brings to the fight. He gestured again, and new images appeared, technical schematics that combined human quantum technology with Viridian crystalline computing and Xyrillian bioengineering. Your crystalline matrices, Ambassador Valen, can store and process quantum information in ways our technology can't match. And the Xyrillian organic technology interfaces with spacetime in ways we're only beginning to understand. Together we might stand a chance, the Xyrillian ambassador finished. More than a chance, Cole corrected. We've run the simulations through our quantum probability engines. With proper cooperation between our species, survival probability increases from 3% to 58%. But it requires trust, complete sharing of technology, and immediate action. Valen studied the human admiral carefully. And if we refuse? Then humanity will fight alone, as we always have. We'll probably lose, but we'll ensure whatever reaches your worlds has been considerably weakened. The choice is yours. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Valen looked at the Xyrillian ambassador, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their shifting bioluminescence. They'd come expecting a diplomatic showing of human superiority. Instead, they'd found themselves drafted into a war for survival against an enemy that devoured reality itself. One question, Admiral, Valen's scales shifted to the deep purple of formal declaration. Why only our two species? Surely others could contribute. Cole's expression darkened. They were our first choices. Let's just say, not everyone reacted well to the news. Or to our proposed solutions. The unspoken message was clear, this wasn't just an invitation to cooperation. It was a test. And their species' future would depend on how they answered. The experimental ship Unity hung in high Earth orbit, its hybrid hull reflecting sunlight in ways that seemed to defy physics. Valen stood on the bridge alongside Admiral Cole and the Xyrillian ambassador Nix, watching as human engineers made final adjustments to the vessel's integrated systems. The ship represented something unprecedented, a true fusion of three species technologies. Its core was built around Viridian crystalline matrices, enhanced by human quantum systems, and wrapped in a living Xyrillian biotech hull. In the 3 months since the revelation about the void, they'd accomplished what should have taken decades. Long-range sensors are detecting an anomaly, Lieutenant Commander Reyes announced from her station. It matches void patterns, but something's different. Cole leaned forward. Different how? It's smaller, more concentrated. Almost like, Reyes stopped, her eyes widening. Sir, it's accelerating. It's a probe. They're studying us. The bridge erupted into activity. This was weeks ahead of their projections. The Unity wasn't fully tested, its systems barely integrated. But Valen realized with growing certainty that they'd run out of time. All stations, battle protocols, Cole's voice carried the weight of command. Ambassador Valen, we need your crystalline matrices at full capacity. Ambassador Nix, engage biohull quantum resonance. Valen moved to the crystalline interface, her scales shifting to deep concentration blue. The ship's systems flowed through her consciousness like a digital river, quantum information processing at speeds that would have been impossible without the human enhancements. Through the ship's sensors, she watched the void probe approach. It was a sphere of absolute darkness, about the size of a small shuttle, moving through space like a bubble of negative reality. Stars disappeared as it passed, leaving temporary holes in the fabric of spacetime. Conventional weapons will be useless, Nix's bioluminescence pulsed with tactical calculations. We need to hit it with everything at once. Cole nodded. Unity Protocol 1. Ambassador Valen, initiate quantum crystalline cascade. Valen's scales rippled as she channeled power through the ship's crystalline core. The human quantum systems amplified the energy, feeding it into the Xyrillian biohull, which began to pulse with otherworldly light. Target locked, Reyes reported. Quantum biocrystalline convergence in 3, 2, 1. The Unity fired. There was no beam, no visible projectile, just a ripple in reality itself. Where the void probe had been, space seemed to fold inward, then outward, like a cosmic origami. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the probe flickered. It's working. Nix's patterns flared with excitement. The combined quantum fields are disrupting its spatial corruption effect. But their celebration was premature. The probe's surface began to shift, adapting to their attack. A tendril of pure darkness extended toward them, and everywhere it passed, reality simply ceased to exist. Evasive maneuvers. Cole ordered, but Valen had a different idea. No, she said, her scales now glowing with inspiration. Everyone, look at the sensor data. It's not just destroying spacetime, it's absorbing information. Learning. Adapting. Which means? Cole demanded. Which means we can feed it false data, Nix caught on immediately. Use the bio-hull to generate quantum misinformation. While the crystalline matrices create a resonance pattern that looks like a vulnerability, Valen continued. And our quantum systems deliver the real punch through that fake weakness, Cole finished. Do it. The next few minutes were a dance of technology and tactics unlike anything in known space. The Unity's hybrid systems worked in perfect synchronization, each species' technology complementing the others. They fed the probe contradictory quantum data, created false spatial weaknesses, and wove a web of deception across multiple dimensions. The probe tried to adapt, but each adaptation only entangled it further in their trap. Finally, caught between three different types of quantum manipulation, it couldn't maintain its coherence. The sphere of darkness collapsed in on itself, taking a small chunk of spacetime with it but leaving behind something unexpected, data. Quantum information encoded in the very fabric of the destroyed space. We did it, Reyes breathed. First confirmed victory against a void construct. But Valen noticed Cole's grim expression. Admiral. Look at the data pattern, he said quietly. This wasn't just a probe. It was a test. They were studying us as much as we were studying them. And now they know we can hurt them, Nix added. Yes, Cole's voice was heavy with implications. Which means what we just faced was nothing compared to what's coming next. Valen looked at the spot where the probe had been, her scales shifting to a deep violet of determination. They'd proven their technologies could work together, that cooperation between species was possible. But they'd also revealed their capabilities to an enemy that devoured entire regions of space. The real war was about to begin. 1 year after the probe incident, Earth's orbital rings hummed with unprecedented activity. The Unity was no longer alone, a fleet of hybrid ships filled the spaceways, each one representing the combined technological genius of 3 civilizations. But Valen, standing in Orbital Command's strategic center, knew they were running out of time. The main void entity has changed course, Admiral Cole announced to the assembled commanders. It's no longer following a linear path. It's coming directly for Earth. The holographic display showed the massive darkness approaching, now moving at speeds that shouldn't have been possible. In the year since their encounter with the probe, they'd learned much about their enemy. The void wasn't just destroying reality, it was consuming information, adding each civilization's knowledge to its own. Time to arrival. Ambassador Nix asked, their bioluminescence pulsing with controlled anxiety. 72 hours, Cole replied. But that's not the worst part. He gestured, and the display zoomed in on the void's leading edge. It's evolved. Our previous tactics won't work. Valen studied the data, her scales shifting through shades of analytical concentration. The void had indeed changed, developing complex structures that seemed designed specifically to counter their hybrid technology. But something about the pattern caught her attention. Look at this, she said, manipulating the crystalline interface to highlight a recurring quantum signature. It's not just adapting to defeat us. It's trying to understand us. Understand us? Cole frowned. It's destroying everything in its path. Yes, but why? Valen's scales flickered with excitement. We've been thinking of it as a mindless force of destruction, but what if it's something else? What if it's seeking understanding in the only way it knows how? Nyx moved closer to the display, their patterns shifting rapidly. By consuming information, processing it, learning. Like a child taking things apart to see how they work. A child with the power to unmake reality, Cole said grimly. How does this help us? Because, Valen's scales blazed with sudden inspiration, we've been fighting it with technology. But what if we could communicate with it instead? The next hours were a blur of activity. They modified the hybrid fleet systems, converting weapons into communication arrays. The crystalline matrices were reconfigured to transmit pure information rather than destructive energy. The Xyrillian bioholes were tuned to resonate with the Void's quantum frequencies. As the Void approached Earth, humanity's greatest defensive fleet took up position. But instead of preparing to fire, they began to broadcast, not just data, but understanding. The combined knowledge of 3 civilizations, freely offered. The Void's approach slowed. It's working, Nyx whispered. It's processing the information. For 6 tense hours, the fleet maintained their transmission. The Void's leading edge began to change, its absolute darkness taking on subtle patterns, almost like language. Then, to everyone's shock, it responded. The message came simultaneously through all their systems, crystalline, quantum, and biological. It wasn't words, exactly, but pure concepts, curiosity, isolation, hunger for knowledge. It's ancient, Valen realized, interpreting the crystalline patterns. Possibly as old as the galaxy itself. Alone. Learning was the only way it knew to connect with others. By absorbing them completely, Cole added, but his voice had lost its military edge. Because it didn't know there was another way. The next transmission they sent was different, not just information, but an invitation. A proposal for coexistence, for mutual learning without destruction. For partnership. The response was immediate. The darkness that had threatened to devour their worlds began to recede, not in retreat, but in transformation. Where there had been void, new space emerged, filled with structures that defied comprehension, a library of cosmic knowledge, offered in exchange for connection. I don't believe it, Cole breathed. We didn't just save our civilizations. We made first contact with something older than time itself. Valen looked at her colleagues, human, Xyrillian, and the transformed void entity now taking shape beyond Earth's orbit. Her scales shifted to a color she'd never displayed before, one that represented not just hope or triumph, but evolution itself. Perhaps that was the test all along, she said softly. Not whether we could fight together, but whether we could grow beyond fighting. Whether we could face the unknown with wisdom instead of weapons. As the hybrid fleet began establishing permanent communication channels with their new ally, Valen reflected on how far they'd come. They'd started with fear of human superiority, moved through desperate cooperation, and emerged with something far greater, a fundamental change in how species could interact. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if reflecting the dawn of a new era. An era where the combined knowledge of ancient and young civilizations would reshape the galaxy not through destruction, but through understanding. It was, Valen realized, just the beginning.